Hello. How are you? So we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping to start with to bring us in. So we decided that we wouldn't be able to do a live tomorrow morning and that we would before the dentist appointment because we suffer a lot of anxiety and other things, and we're housebound, and so we don't leave the and we don't leave the house very much. So we're going to catching the bus to the dentist, and so there's going to be a lot of anxiety in the morning. So we thought it's best to keep it free. And then we realised, which is really good, we're realising our strengths and weaknesses and limitations, which is a lot for us because we used to do a lot in our lives before all of this. So we've had to come to a lot of compassion and kindness for ourselves and acceptance. So we realised that we wouldn't be able to do 2 lives tonight. So we've brought one forward to do now, and then we're going to do the other one tonight at 6:30. We just have spent 3-4 hours attempting to learn OBS and to record it. We could have recorded it on here because we accidentally bought a subscription, but then we cancelled it because we didn't know any of this was going to happen. So welcome to the crazy, chaotic mind that we hold. So welcome to the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. We didn't do any housekeeping yesterday to explain why we are doing this, which is to do with we are in the book club of Ren Gill's community. Ren Gill is an amazing musician. And this book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, is going to be discussed this Sunday, December the 15th. So we will leave in the description box below Ren's Discord community link. So if you want to come and discuss The Wonderful Wizard of Oz with us, then there's only a small, like 4 of us. It's really warm and cozy and welcoming. We personally have rare dyslexia, a processing language disorder. So all abilities are welcome for the discussion of this book. And it doesn't really follow what we perceive a conventional academic book club to follow in the protocol and format. Personally, our mind works in a very creative, abstract way. And so we end up bringing a lot of parallels that are going on in our own life to the book. We have just finished The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And so yeah, we bring in like astrological energies, the tarot cards. And because our mind is like the spiral vortex, we are dancing currently better in the unseen, energetic, vibratory fields, which isn't linear and logical. It's like spiral, vortex, fractal all over the place. So yeah, it will be quite an interesting book club. It's fun, it's warm, it's welcoming. A lot of people in Ren's Discord community also have to face a lot of challenges with chronic physical and mental health conditions. So that's what's brought us back into doing our YouTube and our YouTube lives. We are hoping to do other things, but we wanted to get a bit more organised and structured. So yeah, there's a bit of housekeeping and information why we're doing this. Do excuse any of our reading. We do this. We're also going to leave some more information down below, which we have to add in, of why we do this aloud reading, which isn't just it is a beautiful, lovely audiobook, but it's not a conventional audiobook. There's a lot of behind the scenes Reiki, intentional healing for us and the other, because we become what we consume: food, entertainment, nature. And so personally, we have been on a very long journey to wholeness, to a symbiotic relationship, to our microcosm within, to the macrocosm without. And so you can read along with us, or you can lay back and relax and listen to us. We also we help. This is like reprogramming. It's re-embedding neurological networks. We believe all humans are humans with their bodies, and even though the consciousness and certain personalities and archetypal aspects of self is different, the quantum biomechanics of the energetic body and the physical body is pretty similar. And so what we've learned, which is an extreme end of archetypal selves that have manifested into the physical self, and in conventional terminology from psychology is called dissociative identity disorder, is what a shamanic practice would say self-fragmentation, calling back lost parts of our soul, But for us, it's manifested into the physical body, and we understand hell of a lot more than we're actually able to communicate. So reading aloud for us helps our little uns, because when we go into our little uns, our brain networks change, helps all aspects of us develop our vocabulary basis. It helps the fragmented body parts, sensory systems come together as an integrated whole, because we'll read silently in our head, we'll read aloud on our SoundCloud, then we'll listen to the audios back, then we'll do this. So we're using different platforms of a visual platform and an audio platform. And all of this is interconnecting the fragmented consciousness that's manifested into the physical body. It's not just up in the upper chakras, and is bringing us back into wholeness. And that's the best we can do to describe what's going on so far, which I feel is a lot better. Oh, we said I, which I feel is a lot better than the collective us have done before, because we surrendered after our psych ward adventure. We surrendered to the powers of our subconscious minds and our superconscious minds. The subconscious minds being the lower chakras, the body, all memory, data, information stored in our connective tissue, our fascia, the matrix of the body, and our superconscious mind. And that's we are functioning, or the average human functions in a beta brain wavelength, which we think is between 13 and 18 hertz in everyday waking life, which can be quite stressful. So when we get ourselves into a more relaxed state, we are relaxing into an alpha brain wavelength, which is more of around, look up the information of this because it's going off the top of our head, but it's more around 9 to 13 hertz or something like that. And then below alpha, we're going into theta and delta. And these are the lower, slower vibrations, the reds, the orange, the yellows. And then the gamma, which is 18 hertz upwards, is what we call the superconscious. So we're still working on aligning the right terminology to the right experience that also aligns with the conventional societal dictionary and definitions, not to cause confusion. So again, the most important energetic exchange and skills of communication we are giving you are actually through the unseen energetic unified field matrix of the unseen energetics, not the matrix as in the societal understanding from the film, the matrix of living in the 3D or even 4D dimension, because the 3D is a static, the 4D brings in the conceptualization of time. So everything's a matrix, it just depends which dimension realm one is dancing in or communicating from THs and Fs. So hopefully we're getting a lot better at that. So we're not going to do any card readings today, because we have just waited for people to come in. Hello guys that are watching. Maybe if I don't know if anyone's commenting, because we haven't got our comment section up. So just in case, we've got our comment section up so we can see your comments now. We've done our housekeeping, we've done a little bit of explanation, but not too much of a ramble like we used to do. So now we are going to change our screen setup. There we go. We're going to bring in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum and read along with us, which can also help if English isn't your native language. It can help develop your English skills, help develop so much more in alignment with what we said earlier, and we'll also add the information below like we said earlier. But you can also lay back and relax and just listen to what's going on and see what happens. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. We also just learned yesterday, that there's been a new film for The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So that we thought was quite interesting. The end of November. Everything aligns so beautifully. It brings in those magical moments for us. So we read chapters 1 to 8 yesterday. Today we're going to read chapters 9 to 14. And then tonight at 6:30, we'll read chapters 15 to 24. Enjoy. Chapter 9, The Queen of the Field Mice. We cannot be far from the road of yellow brick now, remarked the Scarecrow as he stood beside the girl, for we have come nearly as far as the river carried us away. The Tin Woodman was about to replay was about to reply when he heard a low growl, and turning his head, which worked beautifully on hinges, he saw a strange beast come bounding over the grass toward them. It was indeed a great yellow wild cat, and the woodman thought it must be chasing something, for its ears were lying close to its head and its mouth was wide open, showing 2 rows of ugly teeth, while its red eyes glowed like balls of fire. As it came nearer, the Tin Woodman saw that running before the beast was a little grey field mouse, and although he had no heart, he knew it was wrong for the wild cat to try to kill such a pretty, harmless creature. So the woodman raised his axe, and as the wild cat ran by, he gave it a quick blow that cut the beast's head clean off from its body, and it rolled over at his feet in 2 pieces. The field mouse, now that it was freed from its enemy, stopped short, and coming slowly up to the woodman, it said in a squeaky little voice, "Oh, thank you ever so much for saving my life." "Don't speak of it, I beg of you," replied the woodman. "I have no heart, you know, so I am careful to help all those who may need a friend, even if it happens to be only a mouse." "Only a mouse?" cried the little animal indignantly. "Why, I am a queen, the queen of all field mice." "Oh, indeed," said the woodman, making a bow. "Therefore you have done a great deed, as well as a brave one, in saving my life," added the queen. At that moment, several mice were seen running up as fast as their little legs could carry them, and when they saw their queen, they exclaimed, "Oh, your Majesty, we thought you would be killed. How did you manage to escape the great wild cat?" They all bowed so low to the little queen that they almost stood upon their heads. "This funny tin man," she answered, "killed the wild cat and saved my life. So hereafter you must all serve him and obey his slightest wish." "We will," cried all the mice in a shrill chorus, and then they scampered in all directions, for Toto had awakened from his sleep, and seeing all these mice around him, he gave one bark of delight and jumped right into the middle of the group. Toto had always loved to chase mice when he lived in Kansas, and he saw no harm in it. But the Tin Woodman caught the dog in his arms and held him tight, while he called to the mice, "Come back, come back! Toto shall not hurt you." At this, the queen of the mice stuck her head out from underneath a clump of grass and asked in a timid voice, "Are you sure he will not bite us?" "I will not let him," said the woodman, "so do not be afraid." One by one, the mice came creeping back, and Toto did not bark again, although he tried to get out of the woodman's arms, and would have bitten him had he not known very well he was made of tin. Finally, one of the biggest mice spoke. "Is there anything we can do," it asked, "to repay you for saving the life of our queen?" "Nothing that I know of," answered the woodman. But the Scarecrow, who had been trying to think, but could not because his head was stuffed with straw, said quickly, "Oh, yes, you can save our friend the Cowardly Lion, who is asleep in the poppy bed." "A lion?" cried the little queen. "Why, he would eat us all up." "Oh, no," declared the Scarecrow. "This lion is a coward." "Really?" asked the mouse. "He says so himself," answered the Scarecrow, "and he would never hurt anyone who is our friend. If you will help us to save him, I promise that he shall treat you all with kindness." "Very well," said the queen. "We trust you, but what shall we do? Are there many of these mice which call you queen and are willing to obey you?" "Oh, yes, there are thousands," she replied. "Then send for them all to come here as soon as possible, and let each one bring a long piece of string." The queen turned to the mice that attended her and told them to go at once and get all her people. As soon as they heard her orders, they ran away in every direction as fast as possible. Now, said the Scarecrow to the Tin Woodman, "you must go to those trees by the riverside and make a truck that will carry the lion." So the woodman went at once to the trees and began to work, and he soon made a truck out of the limbs of trees, from which he chopped away all the leaves and branches. He fastened it together with wooden pegs and made the four wheels out of short pieces of a big tree trunk. So fast and so well did he work that by the time the mice began to arrive, the truck was all ready for them. They came from all directions, and there were thousands of them, big mice and little mice and middle-sized mice, and each one brought a piece of string in his mouth. It was about this time that Dorothy woke from her long sleep and opened her eyes. She was greatly astonished to find herself lying upon the grass with thousands of mice standing around and looking at her timidly. But the Scarecrow told her about everything, and turning to the dignified little mouse, he said, "Permit me to introduce you to Her Majesty the Queen." Dorothy nodded gravely, and the Queen made a curtsy, after which she became quite friendly with the little girl. The Scarecrow and the Woodman now began to fasten the mice to the truck, using the strings they had brought. One end of a string was tied around the neck of each mouse, and the other end to the truck. Of course, the truck was 1,000 times bigger than any of the mice who were to draw it. But when all the mice had been harnessed, they were able to pull it quite easily. Even the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman could sit on it, and were drawn swiftly by their queer little horses to the place where the lion lay asleep. After a great deal of hard work, for the lion was heavy, they managed to get him up on the truck. Then the Queen hurriedly gave her people the order to start, for she feared if the mice stayed among the poppies too long, they also would fall asleep. At first, the little creatures, many though they were, could hardly stir the heavily loaded truck. But the Woodman and the Scarecrow both pushed from behind, and they got along better. Soon they rolled the lion out of the poppy bed to the green fields, where he could breathe the sweet, fresh air again, instead of the poisonous scent of the flowers. Dorothy came to meet them and thanked the little mice warmly for saving her companion from death. She had grown so fond of the big lion, she was glad he had been rescued. Then the mice were unharnessed from the truck and scampered away through the grass to their homes. The Queen of the Mice was the last to leave. "If you ever need us again," she said, "come out into the poppy field and call, and we shall hear you and come to your assistance. Goodbye." "Goodbye," they all answered, and away the Queen ran, while Dorothy held Toto tightly, lest he should run after her and frighten her. After this, they sat down beside the lion until he should awaken, and the Scarecrow brought Dorothy some fruit from a tree nearby, which she ate for her dinner. Chapter 10. The Guardian of the Gate. It was some time before the Cowardly Lion awakened, for he had lain among the poppies a long while, breathing in their deadly fragrance. But when he did open his eyes and roll off the truck, he was very glad to find himself still alive. "I ran as fast as I could," he said, sitting down and yawning, "but the flowers were too strong for me. How did you get me out?" Then they told him of the field mice and how they had generously saved him from death. And the Cowardly Lion laughed and said, "Ha, I have always thought myself very big and terrible, yet such little things as flowers came near to killing me, and such small animals as mice have saved my life. How strange it all is! But comrades, what shall we do now?" "We must journey on until we find the road of yellow brick again," said Dorothy, "and then we can keep on to the Emerald City." So, the lion being fully refreshed and feeling quite himself again, they all started upon the journey, greatly enjoying the walk through the soft, fresh grass. And it was not long before they reached the road of yellow brick and turned again toward the Emerald City where the great Oz dwelt. The road was smooth and well paved now, and the country about was beautiful, so that the travellers rejoiced in leaving the forest far behind, and with it the many dangers they had met in its gloomy shades. Once more they could see fences built beside the road, but these were painted green, and when they came to a small house in which a farmer evidently lived, that also was painted green. They passed by several of these houses during the afternoon, and sometimes people came to the doors and looked at them as if they would like to ask questions. But no one came near them nor spoke to them because of the great lion, of which they were very much afraid. The people were all dressed in clothing of a lovely emerald green colour and wore peaked hats like those of the Munchkins. "This must be the land of Oz," said Dorothy, "and we are surely getting near the Emerald City." "Yes," answered the Scarecrow, "everything is green here, while in the country of the Munchkins blue was the favourite colour. But the people do not seem to be as friendly as the Munchkins, and I'm afraid we shall be unable to find a place to pass the night." "I should like something to eat besides fruit," said the girl, "and I'm sure Toto is nearly starved. Let us stop at the next house and talk to the people." So, when they came to a good-sized farmhouse, Dorothy walked boldly up to the door and knocked. A woman opened it just far enough to look out and said, "What do you want, child? And why is that great lion with you?" "We wish to pass the night with you, if you will allow us," answered Dorothy, "and the lion is my friend and comrade, and would not hurt you for the world." "Is he tame?" asked the woman, opening the door a little wider. "Oh, yes," said the girl, "and he is a great coward too. He will be more afraid of you than you are of him." "Well," said the woman, after thinking it over and taking another peep at the lion, "if that is the case, you may come in, and I will give you some supper and a place to sleep." So they all entered the house, where there were, besides the woman, 2 children and a man. The man had hurt his leg and was lying on the couch in a corner. They seemed greatly surprised to see so strange a company, and while the woman was busy laying the table, the man asked, "Where are you all going?" "To the Emerald City," said Dorothy, "to see the great Oz." "Oh, indeed!" exclaimed the man. "Are you sure that Oz will see you?" "Why not?" she replied. "Why, it is said that he never lets anyone come into his presence. I have been to the Emerald City many times, and it is a beautiful and wonderful place. But I have never been permitted to see the great Oz, nor do I know of any living person who has seen him." "Does he never go out?" asked the Scarecrow. "Never. He sits day after day in the great throne room of his palace, and even those who wait upon him do not see him face to face." "What is he like?" asked the girl. "That is hard to tell," said the man thoughtfully. "You see, Oz is a great wizard and can take on any form he wishes, so that some say he looks like a bird, and some say he looks like an elephant, and some say he looks like a cat. To others he appears as a beautiful fairy or a brownie, or in any other form that pleases him. But who the real Oz is when he is in his own form, no living person can tell." "That is very strange," said Dorothy, "but we must try, in some way, to see him, or we shall have made our journey for nothing." "Why do you wish to see the terrible Oz?" asked the man. I want him to give me some brains," said the Scarecrow eagerly. "Oh, Oz could do that easily enough," declared the man. "He has more brains than he needs." "And I want him to give me a heart," said the Tin Woodman. "That will not trouble him," continued the man, "for Oz has a large collection of hearts of all sizes and shapes." "And I want him to give me courage," said the Cowardly Lion. "Oz keeps a great pot of courage in his throne room," said the man, "which he has covered with a golden plate to keep it from running over. He will be glad to give you some." "And I want him to send me back to Kansas," said Dorothy. "Where is Kansas?" asked the man in surprise. "I don't know," replied Dorothy sorrowfully, "but it is my home, and I'm sure it's somewhere." "Very likely. Well, Oz can do anything, so I suppose he will find Kansas for you. But first you must get to see him, and that will be a hard task, for the great wizard does not like to see anyone, and he usually has his own way. But what do you want?" he continued, speaking to Toto. Toto only wagged his tail, for, strange to say, he could not speak. The woman now called to them that supper was ready, So they gathered around the table, and Dorothy ate some delicious porridge and a dish of scrambled eggs and a plate of nice white bread, and enjoyed her meal. The lion ate some of the porridge, but did not care for it, saying it was made from oats, and oats were food for horses, not for lions. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman ate nothing at all. Toto ate a little of everything and was glad to get a good supper again. The woman now gave Dorothy a bed to sleep in, and Toto lay down beside her, while the lion guarded the door of her room so she might not be disturbed. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman stood up in a corner and kept quiet all night, although of course they could not sleep. The next morning, as soon as the sun was up, they started on their way and soon saw a beautiful green glow in the sky just before them. "That must be the Emerald City," said Dorothy, as they walked on. The green glow became brighter and brighter, and it seemed that at last they were nearing the end of their travels. Yet it was afternoon before they came to the great wall that surrounded the city. It was high and thick and of a bright green colour. In front of them, and at the end of the road of yellow brick, was a big gate, all studded with emeralds that glittered so in the sun that even the painted eyes of the Scarecrow were dazzled by their brilliancy. There was a bell beside the gate, and Dorothy pushed the button and heard a silvery tinkle sound within. Then the big gate swung slowly open, and they all passed through and found themselves in a high arched room, the walls of which glistened with countless emeralds. Before them stood a little man about the same size as the Munchkins. He was clothed all in green, from his head to his feet, and even his skin was of a greenish tint. At his side was a large green box. When he saw Dorothy and her companions, the man asked, "What do you wish in the Emerald City?" "We came here to see the Great Oz," said Dorothy. The man was so surprised at this answer that he sat down to think it over. "It has been many years since anyone asked me to see Oz," he said, shaking his head in perplexity. "He is powerful and terrible, and if you come on an idle or foolish errand to bother the wise reflections of the great wizard, he might be angry and destroy you all in an instant." "But it is not a foolish errand, nor an idle one," replied the Scarecrow. "It is important, and we have been told that Oz is a good wizard." "So he is," said the Green Man, "and he rules the Emerald City wisely and well. But to those who are not honest, or who approach him from curiosity, he is most terrible, and few have ever dared ask to see his face. I am the guardian of the gates, and since you demand to see the great Oz, I must take you to his palace. But first you must put on the spectacles." "Why?" asked Dorothy. "Because if you did not wear spectacles, the brightness and glory of the Emerald City would blind you. Even those who live in the city must wear spectacles night and day. They are all locked on, for Oz so ordered it when the city was first built, and I have the only key that will unlock them." He opened the big box, and Dorothy saw that it was filled with spectacles of every size and shape. All of them had green glasses in them. The guardian of the gates found a pair that would just fit Dorothy and put them over her eyes. There were two golden bands fastened to them that passed around the back of the head, where they were locked together by a little key that was at the end of a chain. The guardian of the gates wore around his neck. When they were on, Dorothy could not take them off, and off had she wished, but of course she did not wish to be blinded by the glare of the Emerald City, so she said nothing. Then the Green Man fitted spectacles for the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and the Lion, and even on little Toto, and all were locked fast with the key. Then the guardian of the gates put on his own glasses and told them he was ready to show them to the palace. Taking a big golden key from a peg on the wall, he opened another gate, and they all followed him through the portal into the streets of the Emerald City. Chapter 11, The Wonderful City of Oz. Even with eyes protected by the green spectacles, Dorothy and her friends were at first dazzled by the brilliancy of the wonderful city. The streets were lined with beautiful houses, all built of green marble and studded everywhere with sparkling emeralds. They walked over a pavement of the same green marble, and where the blocks were joined together were rows of emeralds, set closely and glittering in the brightness of the sun. The window panes were of green glass. Even the sky above the city had a green tint, and the rays of the sun were green. There were many people, men, women, and children, walking about, and these were all dressed in green clothes and had greenish skins. They looked at Dorothy and her strangely assorted company with wondering eyes, and the children all ran away and hid behind their mothers when they saw the lion, but no one spoke to them. Many shops stood in the street, and Dorothy saw that everything in them was green. Green candy and green popcorn were offered for sale, as well as green shoes, green hats, and green clothes of all sorts. At one place, a man was selling green lemonade, and when the children bought it, Dorothy could see that they paid for it with green pennies. There seemed to be no horses nor animals of any kind. The men carried things around in little green carts, which they pushed before them. Everyone seemed happy and contented and prosperous. The guardian of the gates led them through the streets until they came to a big building, exactly in the middle of the city, which was the Palace of Oz. The great wizard there was a soldier before the door, dressed in a green uniform and wearing a long green beard. "Here are the strangers," said the guardian of the gates to him, "and they demand to see the great Oz." "Step inside," answered the soldier, "and I will carry your message to him." So they passed through the palace gates and were led into a big room with a green carpet and lovely green furniture, a lovely green furniture set with emeralds. The soldier made them all wipe their feet upon a green mat before entering this room, and when they were seated, he said politely, "Please make yourselves comfortable while I go to the door of the throne room and tell Oz you are here." They had to wait a long time before the soldier returned. When, at last, he came back, Dorothy asked, "Have you seen Oz?" "Oh, no," returned the soldier. "I have never seen him, but I spoke to him as he sat behind his screen and gave him your message. He said he will grant you an audience, if you so desire, but each one of you must enter his presence alone, and he will admit but one each day. Therefore, as you must remain in the palace for several days, I will have you shown to your rooms, where you may rest in comfort after your journey." "Thank you," replied the girl. "That is very kind of Oz." The soldier now blew upon a green whistle, and at once a young girl dressed in a pretty green silk gown entered the room. She had lovely green hair and greener eyes, and she bowed low before Dorothy as she said, "Follow me, and I will show you to your room." So Dorothy said goodbye to all her friends, except Toto, and taking the dog in her arms, followed the green girl through 7 passages and up 3 flights of stairs until they came to a room at the front of the palace. It was the sweetest little room in the world, with a soft, comfortable bed that had sheets of green silk and a green velvet counterpane. There was a tiny fountain in the middle of the room that shot a spray of green perfume into the air, to fall back into a beautifully carved green marble basin. Beautiful green flowers stood in the windows, and there was a shelf with a row of little green books. When Dorothy had time to open these books, she found them full of queer green pictures that made her laugh. They were so funny. In a wardrobe were many green dresses made of silk and satin and velvet, and all of them fitted Dorothy exactly. "Make yourself perfectly at home," said the green girl, "and if you wish for anything, ring the bell. Oz will send for you tomorrow morning." She left Dorothy alone and went back to the others. These she also led to rooms, and each one of them found himself lodged in a very pleasant part of the palace. Of course, this politeness was wasted on the Scarecrow, for when he found himself alone in his room, he stood stupidly in one spot, just within the doorway, to wait till morning. It would not rest him to lie down, and he could not close his eyes, so he remained all night staring at a little spider which was weaving its web in a corner of the room, just as if it were not one of the most wonderful rooms in the world. The Tin Woodman lay down on his bed from force of habit, for he remembered when he was made of flesh. But not being able to sleep, he passed the night moving his joints up and down to make sure they kept in good working order. The lion would have preferred a bed of dried leaves in the forest and did not like being shut up in a room. But he had too much sense to let this worry him, so he sprang upon the bed and rolled himself up like a cat and purred himself asleep in a minute. The next morning, after breakfast, the Green Maiden came to fetch Dorothy, and she dressed her in one of the prettiest gowns made of green brocaded satin. Dorothy put on a green silk apron and tied a green ribbon around Toto's neck, and they started for the throne room of the Great Oz. First, they came to a great hall in which were many ladies and gentlemen of all apologies. First they First they came to a great hall in which were many ladies and gentlemen of the court, all dressed in rich costumes. These people had nothing to do but talk to each other, but they always came to wait outside the throne room every morning, although they were never permitted to see Oz. As Dorothy entered, they looked at her curiously, and one of them whispered, "Are you really going to look upon the face of Oz the Terrible?" "Of course," answered the girl, "if he will see me." "Oh, he will see you," said the soldier, who had taken her message to the wizard, "although he does not like to have people ask to see him. Indeed, at first he was angry and said I should send you back where you came from. Then he asked me what you... Lots of distractions, sorry. Then he asked me what you looked like, and when I mentioned your silver shoes, he was very much interested. At last I told him about the mark upon your forehead, and he decided he would admit you to his presence. Just then a bell rang, and the green girl said to Dorothy, "That is the signal you must go into the front throne room alone." She opened a little door, and Dorothy walked boldly through and found herself in a wonderful place. It was a big, round room with a high arched roof, and the walls and ceiling and floor were covered with large emeralds set closely together. In the centre of the roof was a great light, as bright as the sun, which made the emeralds sparkle in a wonderful manner. But what interested Dorothy most was the big throne of green marble that stood in the middle of the room. It was shaped like a chair and sparkled with gems, as did everything else. In the centre of the chair was an enormous head without a body to support it, or any arms or legs whatever. There was no hair upon his head, but it had eyes and a nose and mouth, and was much bigger than the head of the biggest giant. As Dorothy gazed upon this in wonder and fear, the eyes turned slowly and looked at her sharply and steadily. Then the mouth moved, and Dorothy heard a voice say, "I am Oz, the great and terrible. Who are you, and why do you seek me?" It was not such an awful voice as she had expected to come from a big head, so she took courage and answered, "I am Dorothy, the small and meek. I have come to you for help." The eyes looked at her thoughtfully for a full minute, and then said the voice, "Where did you get the silver shoes?" "I got them from the Wicked Witch of the East, when my house fell on her and killed her," she replied. "Where did you get the mark upon your forehead?" continued the voice. "That is where the Good Witch of the North kissed me when she bade me good-bye and sent me to you," said the girl. Again, the eyes looked at her sharply, and they saw she was telling the truth. Then Oz asked, "What do you wish me to do?" "Send me back to Kansas, where my Aunt Em and Uncle Henry are," she answered earnestly. "I don't like your country, although it is so beautiful, and I am sure Aunt Em will be dreadfully worried over my being away so long." The eyes winked 3 times, and then they turned up to the ceiling and down to the floor, and rolled around so queerly that they seemed to see every part of the room, and at last they looked at Dorothy again. "Why should I do this for you?" asked Oz. "Because you are strong and I am weak, because you are a great wizard and I am only a little girl." "But you were strong enough to kill the Wicked Witch of the East," said Oz. "That just happened," returned Dorothy simply. "I could not help it." "Well," said the head, "I will give you my answer. You will have no right to expect me to send you back to Kansas unless you do something for me in return. In this country, everyone must pay for everything he gets. If you wish me to use my magic power to send you home again, you must do something for me first. Help me, and I will help you." "What must I do?" asked the girl. "Kill the Wicked Witch of the West," answered Oz. "But I cannot," exclaimed Dorothy, greatly surprised. "You kill the Witch of the East, and you wear the silver shoes which bear a powerful charm. There is now but one wicked witch left in all this land, and when you can tell me she is dead, I will send you back to Kansas, but not before." The little girl began to weep. She was so much disappointed, and the eyes winked again and looked upon her anxiously, as if the great Oz felt that she could help him if she would. "I've never killed anything willingly," she sobbed. "Even if I wanted to, how could I kill the Wicked Witch? If you, who are great and terrible, cannot kill her yourself, how do you expect me to do it?" "I do not know," said the head, "but that is my answer, and until the Wicked Witch dies, you will not see your uncle and aunt again. Remember that the witch is wicked, tremendously wicked, and ought to be killed. Now go, and do not ask to see me again until you have done your task." Sorrowfully, Dorothy left the throne room and went back where the lion and the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were waiting to hear what Oz had said to her. "There is no hope for me," she said sadly, "for Oz will not send me home until I have killed the Wicked Witch of the West, and that I can never do." Her friends were sorry, but could do nothing to help her, so Dorothy went to her own room and lay down on the bed and cried herself to sleep. The next morning, the soldier with the green whiskers came to the Scarecrow and said, "Come with me, for Oz has sent for you." So the Scarecrow followed him and was admitted into the great throne room, where he saw, sitting in the emerald throne, a most lovely lady. She was dressed in green silk gauze and wore upon her flowing green locks with a crown of jewels. Growing from her shoulders were wings, gorgeous in colour and so light that they fluttered if the slightest breath of air reached them. When the Scarecrow had bowed, as prettily as his straw stuffing would let him, before this beautiful creature, she looked upon him sweetly and said, "I am Oz, the great and terrible. Who are you, and why do you seek me?" Now the Scarecrow, who had expected to see the great head Dorothy had told him of, was much astonished, but he answered her bravely, "I am only a scarecrow stuffed with straw, therefore I have no brains, and I come to you praying that you will put brains in my head instead of straw, so that I may become as much a man as any other in your dominions." "Why should I do this for you?" asked the lady. "Because you are wise and powerful, and no one else can help me," answered the Scarecrow. "I never grant favours without some return," said Oz, "but this much I will promise. If you will kill for me the Wicked Witch of the West, I will bestow upon you a great many brains, and such good brains that you will be the wisest man in all the land of Oz." "I thought you asked Dorothy to kill the witch," said the Scarecrow, in surprise. So I did. I don't care who kills her, but until she is dead, I will not grant your wish. Now go, and do not seek me again until you have earned the brains you so greatly desire." The Scarecrow went sorrowfully back to his friends and told them what Oz had said. And Dorothy was surprised to find that the great wizard was not a head as she had seen him, but a lovely lady. "All the same," said the Scarecrow, "she needs a heart as much as the Tin Woodman." On the next morning, the soldier with the green whiskers came to the Tin Woodman and said, "Oz has sent for you. Follow me." So the Tin Woodman followed him and came to the great throne room. He did not know whether he would find Oz a lovely lady or a head, but he hoped it would be the lovely lady. For, he said to himself, "If it is the head, I am sure I shall not be given a heart, since a head has no heart of its own and therefore cannot feel for me. But if it is the lovely lady, I shall beg hard for a heart, for all ladies are themselves said to be kindly hearted." But when the Woodman entered the great throne room, he saw neither the head nor the lady, for Oz had taken the shape of a most terrible beast. It was nearly as big as an elephant, and the green throne seemed hardly strong enough to hold its weight. The beast had a head like that of a rhinoceros, only there were 5 eyes in its face. There were 5 long arms growing out of its body, and it also had 5 long, slim legs. Thick, woolly hair covered every part of it, and a more dreadful-looking monster could not be imagined. It was fortunate the Tin Woodman had no heart at that moment, for it would have been beat loud and fast from terror. But being only tin, the Woodman was not at all afraid, although he was much disappointed. "I am Oz, the great and terrible," spoke the beast, in a voice that was one great roar. "Who are you, and why do you seek me? I am a woodman, and made of tin, therefore I have no heart and cannot love. I pray you to give me a heart, that I may be as other men are." "Why should I do this?" demanded the beast. "Because I ask it, and you alone can grant my request," answered the woodman. Oz gave a low growl at this, but said gruffly, "If you indeed desire a heart, you must earn it." "How?" asked the woodman. "Help Dorothy to kill the Wicked Witch of the West," replied the beast. "When the witch is dead, come to me, and I will then give you the biggest and kindest and most loving heart in all the land of Oz." So the Tin Woodman was forced to return sorrowfully to his friends and tell them of the terrible beast he had seen. They all wondered greatly at the many forms the great wizard could take upon himself, and the Lion said, "If he is a beast, when I go to see him, I shall roar my loudest and so frighten him that he will grant all I ask. And if he is the lovely lady, I shall pretend to spring upon her and so compel her to do my bidding. And if he is the great head, he will be at my mercy, for I will roll his head all about the room until he promises to give us what we desire. So be of good cheer, my friends, for all will yet be well." The next morning, the soldier with the green whiskers led the Lion to the great throne room and bade him enter the presence of Oz. The Lion at once passed through the door and, glancing around, saw to his surprise that before the throne was a ball of fire, so fierce and glowing he could scarcely bear to gaze upon it. His first thought was that Oz had, by accident, caught on fire and was burning up. But he tried to go nearer. The heat was so intense that it singed his whiskers, and he crept back trembling to a spot nearer the door. Then a low, quiet voice came from the ball of fire, and these were the words it spoke. "I am Oz, the great and terrible. Who are you, and why do you seek me?" And the Lion answered, "I am a cowardly lion, afraid of everything. I came to you to beg that you give me courage, so that in reality I may become the king of beasts as men call me." "Why should I give you courage?" demanded Oz. Because of all wizards, you are the greatest and alone have power to grant my request, answered the lion. The ball of fire burned fiercely for a time, and the voice said, "Bring me proof that the wicked witch is dead, and that moment I will give you courage. But as long as the wicked witch lives, you must remain a coward." The lion was angry at this speech, but could say nothing in reply. And while he stood silently gazing at the ball of fire, it became so furiously hot that he turned tail and rushed from the room. He was glad to find his friends waiting for him and told them of his terrible interview with the wizard. "What shall we do now?" asked Dorothy sadly. "There is only one thing we can do," returned the lion, "and that is to go to the land of the Winkies, seek out the wicked witch, and destroy her." "But suppose we cannot," said the girl. "Then I shall never have courage," declared the lion. "And I shall never have brains," added the Scarecrow. "And I shall never have a heart," spoke the Tin Woodman. "And I shall never see Aunt Em and Uncle Henry," said Dorothy, beginning to cry. "Be careful," cried the green girl. "The tears will fall on your green silk gown and spot it." So Dorothy dried her eyes and said, "I suppose we must try it, but I am sure I do not want to kill anybody, even to see Aunt Em again." "I will go with you, but I'm too much of a coward to kill the witch," said the lion. "I will go too," declared the Scarecrow, "but I shall not be of much help to you. I am such a fool." "I haven't the heart to harm even a witch," remarked the Tin Woodman. "But if you go, I certainly shall go with you." Therefore, it was decided to start upon their journey the next morning, and the woodman sharpened his axe on a green grindstone and had all his joints properly oiled. The Scarecrow stuffed himself with fresh straw, and Dorothy put new paint on his eyes that he might see better. The green girl, who was very kind to them, filled Dorothy's basket with good things to eat and fastened a little bell around Toto's neck with a green ribbon. They went to bed quite early and slept soundly until daylight, when they were awakened by the crowing of a green cock that lived in the backyard of the palace, and the cackling of a hen that had laid a green egg. We are just going to let our beautiful Zendaya out. Thank you for being patient, Zen. Here we go. Have fun. Okay, thank you for bearing with us and being patient there yourself. Chapter 12. The Search for the Wicked Witch. The soldier with the green whiskers led them through the streets of the Emerald City until they reached the room where the guardian of the gates lived. This officer unlocked their spectacles to put them back in his great box, and then he politely opened the gate for our friends. "Which road leads to the Wicked Witch of the West?" asked Dorothy. "There is no road," answered the guardian of the gates. "No one ever wishes to go that way." "How, then, are we to find her?" inquired the girl. "That will be easy," replied the man, "for when she knows you are in the country of the Winkies, she will find you and make you all her slaves." "Perhaps not," said the Scarecrow, "for we mean to destroy her." "Oh, that is different," said the guardian of the gates. "No one has ever destroyed her before, so I naturally thought she would make slaves of you, as she has of the rest. But take care, for she is wicked and fierce and may not allow you to destroy her. Keep to the west where the sun sets, and you cannot fail to find her." They thanked him and bade him goodbye and turned toward the west, walking over fields of soft grass, dotted here and there with daisies and buttercups. Dorothy still wore the pretty silk dress she had put on in the palace, but now, to her surprise, she found it was no longer green, but pure white. The ribbon around Toto's neck had also lost its green colour and was as white as Dorothy's dress. The Emerald City was soon left far behind. As they advanced, the ground became rougher and hillier, for there were no farms nor houses in this country of the West, and the ground was untilled. In the afternoon, the sun shone hot in their faces, for there were no trees to offer them shade, so that before night Dorothy and Toto and the lion were tired and lay down upon the grass and fell asleep, with the Woodman and the Scarecrow keeping watch. Now the Wicked Witch of the West had but one eye, yet that was as powerful as a telescope and could see everywhere. So, as she sat in the door of her castle, she happened to look around and saw Dorothy lying asleep, with her friends all about her. They were a long distance off, but the Wicked Witch was angry to find them in her country. So she blew upon a silver whistle that hung around her neck. At once there came running to her from all directions a pack of great wolves. They had long legs and fierce eyes and sharp teeth. "Go to those people," said the witch, "and tear them to pieces." "Are you not going to make them your slaves?" asked the leader of the wolves. "No," she answered. "One is of tin and one is of straw, and one is a girl and another a lion. None of them is fit to work, so you may tear them into small pieces." "Very well," said the wolf, and he dashed away at full speed, followed by the others. It was lucky the Scarecrow and the Woodman were wide awake and heard the wolves coming. "This is my fight," said the Woodman, "so get behind me and I will meet them as they come." He seized his axe, which he had made very sharp, and as the leader of the wolves came on, the Tin Woodman swung his arm and chopped the wolf's head from its body, so that it immediately died. As soon as he could raise his axe, another wolf came up, and he also fell under the sharp edge of the Tin Woodman's weapon. There were 40 wolves, and 40 times a wolf was killed, so that at last they all lay dead in a heap before the Woodman. Then he put down his axe and sat beside the Scarecrow, who said, "It was a good fight, friend." They waited until Dorothy awoke the next morning. The little girl was quite frightened when she saw the great pile of shaggy wolves, but the Tin Woodman told her all. She thanked him for saving them and sat down to breakfast, after which they started again upon their journey. Now, this same morning, the Wicked Witch came to the door of her castle and looked out with her one eye that could see far off. She saw all her wolves lying dead and the strangers still travelling through her country. This made her angrier than before, and she blew her silver whistle twice. Straight away, a great flock of wild crows came flying toward her, enough to darken the sky. And the Wicked Witch said to the King Crow, "Fly at once to the strangers, peck out their eyes, and tear them to pieces." The wild crows flew in one great flock toward Dorothy and her companions. When the little girl saw them coming, she was afraid. But the Scarecrow said, "This is my battle, so lie down beside me, and you will not be harmed." So they all lay upon the ground except the Scarecrow, and he stood up and stretched out his arms, and when the crows saw him, they were frightened, as these birds always are by scarecrows, and did not dare to come any nearer. But the King Crow said, "It is only a stuffed man. I will peck his eyes out." The King Crow flew at the Scarecrow, who caught it by the head and twisted its neck until it was dead. And then another crow flew at him, and the Scarecrow twisted its neck also. There were 40 crows, and 40 times the Scarecrow twisted a neck, until at last all were lying dead beside him. Then he called to his companions to rise, and again they went upon their journey. When the Wicked Witch looked out again and saw all her crows lying in a heap, she got into a terrible rage, and blew 3 times upon her silver whistle. Forthwith there was heard a great buzzing in the air, and a swarm of black bees came flying toward her. "Go to the strangers and sting them to death," commanded the witch, and the bees turned and flew rapidly until they came to where Dorothy and her friends were walking. But the Woodman had seen them coming, and the Scarecrow had decided what to do. "Take out my straw and scatter it over the little girl and the dog and the lion," he said to the woodman, "and the bees cannot sting them." This the woodman did, and as Dorothy lay close beside the lion and held Toto in her arms, the straw covered them entirely. The bees came and found no one but the woodman to sting, so they flew at him and broke off all their stings against the tin, without hurting the woodman at all. And as bees cannot live with their stings when their stings are broken, that was the end of the black bees, and they lay scattered thick about the woodman, like little heaps of fine coal. Then Dorothy and the lion got up, and the girl helped the Tin Woodman put the straw back into the Scarecrow again, until he was as good as ever. So they started upon their journey once more. The Wicked Witch was so angry when she saw her black bees in little heaps like fine coal that she stamped her foot and tore her hair and gnashed her teeth, and then she called a dozen of her slaves, who were the Winkies, and gave them sharp spears, telling them to go to the strangers and destroy them. The Winkies were not brave people, but they had to do as they were told, so they marched away until they came near to Dorothy. Then the lion gave a great roar and sprang towards them, and the poor Winkies were so frightened that they ran back as fast as they could. When they returned to the castle, the Wicked Witch beat them well with a strap and sent them back to their work, after which she sat down to think what she should do next. She could not understand how all her plans to destroy these strangers had failed, but she was a powerful witch as well as a wicked one, and she soon made her mind how to act. She soon made up her mind how to act. There was in her cupboard a golden cap, with a circle of diamonds and rubies running round it. This golden cap had a charm. Whoever owned it could call 3 times upon the winged monkeys, who would obey any order they were given, but no person could command these strange creatures more than 3 times. Twice already the Wicked Witch had used the charm of the cap. Once was when she had made the Winkies her slaves and set herself to rule over their country. The winged monkeys had helped her to do this. The second time was when she had fought against the great Oz himself and driven him out of the land of the West. The winged monkeys had also helped her in doing this. Only once more could she use this golden cap, for which reason she did not like to do so until all her other powers were exhausted. But now that her fierce wolves and her wild crows and her stinging bees were gone, and her slaves had been scared away by the cowardly lion, she saw there was only one way left to destroy Dorothy and her friends. So the Wicked Witch took the golden cap from her cupboard and placed it upon her head. Then she stood upon her left foot and said slowly, "Ep pe, pep pe, cat ke." Next she stood upon her right foot and said, "Hill lo, hol lo, hel lo." After this she stood up on both feet and cried in a loud voice, "Ziz-zee, zuz-zee, zik." Now the charm began to work. The sky was darkened and a low rumbling sound was heard in the air. There was a rushing of many wings, a great chattering and laughing, and the sun came out of the dark sky to show the Wicked Witch surrounded by a crowd of monkeys, each with a pair of immense and powerful wings on his shoulders. One, much bigger than the others, seemed to be their leader. He flew close to the witch and said, "You have called us for the 3rd and last time. What do you command?" "Go to the strangers who are within my land and destroy them all except the lion," said the Wicked Witch. "Bring that beast to me, for I have a mind to harness him like a horse and make him work." "Your commands shall be obeyed," said the leader. Then, with a great deal of chattering and noise, the winged monkeys flew away to the place where Dorothy and her friends were walking. Some of the monkeys seized the Tin Woodman and carried him through the air until they were over a country thickly covered with sharp rocks. Here they dropped the poor woodman, who fell a great distance to the rocks, where he lay so battered and dented that he could neither move nor groan. Others of the monkeys caught the Scarecrow, and with their long fingers pulled all of the straw out of his clothes and head. They made his hat and boots and clothes into a small bundle and threw it into the top branches of a tall tree. The remaining monkeys threw pieces of stout rope around the lion and wound many coils about his body and head and legs until he was able to bite or scratch or struggle in any way. Then they lifted him up and flew away with him to the witch's castle, where he was placed in a small yard with a high iron fence around it so that he could not escape. But Dorothy they did not harm at all. She stood with Toto in her arms, watching the sad fate of her comrades and thinking it would soon be her turn. The leader of the winged monkeys flew up to her, his long, hairy arms stretched out and his ugly face grinning terribly. But he saw the mark of the good witch's kiss upon her forehead and stopped short, motioning the others not to touch her. "We dare not harm this little girl," he said to them, "for she is protected by the power of good, and that is greater than the power of evil. All we can do is to carry her to the castle of the wicked witch and leave her there." So carefully and gently they lifted Dorothy in their arms and carried her swiftly through the air until they came to the castle, where they set her down upon the front doorstep. Then the leader said to the witch, "We have obeyed you as far as we were able. The Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow are destroyed, and the lion is tied up in your yard. The little girl we dared not harm, nor the dog she carries in her arms. Your power over our band is now ended, and you will never see us again." Then all the winged monkeys, with much laughing and chattering and noise, flew into the air and were soon out of sight. The wicked witch was both surprised and worried when she saw the mark on Dorothy's forehead, for she knew well that neither the winged monkeys nor she herself dare hurt the girl in any way. She looked down at Dorothy's feet and, seeing the silver shoes, began to tremble with fear, for she knew what a powerful charm belonged to them. At first, the witch was tempted to run away from Dorothy, but she happened to look into the child's eyes and saw how simple the soul behind them was, and that the little girl did not know of the wonderful power the silver shoes gave her. So the wicked witch laughed to herself and thought, "I can still make her my slave, for she does not know how to use her power." Then she said to Dorothy, harshly and severely, "Come with me and see that you mind everything I tell you, for if you do not, I will make an end of you, as I did of the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow." Dorothy followed her through many of the beautiful rooms in her castle until they came to the kitchen, where the witch bade her clean the pots and kettles and sweep the floor and keep the fire fed with wood. Dorothy went to work meekly, with her mind made up to work as hard as she could, for she was glad the wicked witch had decided not to kill her. With Dorothy hard at work, the witch thought she would go into the courtyard and harness the cowardly lion like a horse. It would amuse her, she was sure, to make him draw her chariot whenever she wished to go to drive. But as she opened the gate, the lion gave a loud roar and bounded at her so fiercely that the witch was afraid and ran out and shut the gate again. "If I cannot harness you," said the witch to the lion, speaking through the bars of the gate, "I can starve you. You shall have nothing to eat until you do as I wish." So after that, she took no food to the imprisoned lion, but every day she came to the gate at noon and asked, "Are you ready to be harnessed like a horse?" And the lion would answer, "No, if you come in this yard, I will bite you." The reason the lion did not have to do as the witch wished was that every night, while the woman was asleep, Dorothy carried him food from the cupboard. After he had eaten, he would lay down on his bed of straw, and Dorothy would lie beside him and put her head on his soft, shaggy mane, while they talked of their troubles and tried to plan some way of escape. But they could find no way to get out of the castle, for it was constantly guarded by the yellow Winkies, who were the slaves of the wicked witch and too afraid of her not to do as she told them. The girl had to work hard during the day, and often the witch threatened to beat her with the same old umbrella she always carried in her hand. But in truth, she did not dare to strike Dorothy because of the mark upon her forehead. The child did not know this and was full of fear for herself and Toto. Once the witch struck Toto a blow with her umbrella, and the brave little dog flew at her and bit her leg in return. The witch did not bleed where she was bitten, for she was so wicked that the blood in her had dried up many years before. Dorothy's life became very sad as she grew to understand that it would be harder than ever to get back to Kansas and Aunt Em again. Sometimes she would cry bitterly for hours, with Toto sitting at her feet and looking into her face, whining dismally to show how sorry he was for his little mistress. Toto did not really care whether he was in Kansas or the Land of Oz, so long as Dorothy was with him. But he knew the little girl was unhappy, and that made him unhappy too. Now the wicked witch had a great longing to have for her own the silver shoes which the girl always wore. Her bees and her crows and her wolves were lying in heaps and drying up, and she had used up all the power of the golden cap. But if she could only get hold of the silver shoes, they would give her more power than all the other things she had lost. She watched Dorothy carefully to see if she ever took off her shoes, thinking she might steal them. But the child was so proud of her pretty shoes that she never took them off except at night and when she took her bath. The witch was too much afraid of the dark to dare go in Dorothy's room at night to take the shoes, and her dread of water was greater than her fear of the dark, so she never came near when Dorothy was bathing. Indeed, the old witch never touched water, nor ever let water touch her in any way. But the wicked creature was very cunning, and she finally thought of a trick that would give her what she wanted. She placed a bar of iron in the middle of the kitchen floor, and then, by her magic arts, made the iron invisible to human eyes, so that when Dorothy walked across the floor, she stumbled over the bar, not being able to see it, and fell at full length. She was not much hurt, but in her fall one of the silver shoes came off, and before she could reach it, the witch had snatched it away and put it on her own skinny foot. The wicked woman was greatly pleased with the success of her trick, for as long as she had one of the shoes, she owned half the power of their charm, and Dorothy could not use it against her, even had she known how to do so. The little girl, seeing she had lost one of her pretty shoes, grew angry and said to the witch, "Give me back my shoe." "I will not," she retorted the witch, "for it is now my shoe and not yours." "You are a wicked creature," cried Dorothy. "You have no right to take my shoe from me." "I shall keep it just the same," said the witch, laughing at her, "and some day I shall get the other one from you too." This made Dorothy so very angry that she picked up the bucket of water and stood near and dashed it over the witch, wetting her from head to foot. Instantly, the wicked woman gave a loud cry of fear, and then, as Dorothy looked at her in wonder, the witch began to shrink and fall away. "See what you have done!" she screamed. "In a minute I shall smelt away." "I'm very sorry indeed," said Dorothy, who was truly frightened to see the witch actually melting away like brown sugar before her very eyes. "Didn't you know water would be the end of me?" asked the witch in a wailing, despairing voice. "Of course not," answered Dorothy. "How should I?" "Well, in a few minutes I shall be all melted, and you will have the castle to yourself. I have been wicked in my day, but I never thought a little girl like you would ever be able to melt me and end my wicked deeds. Look out, here I go." With these words, The witch fell down in a brown, melted, shapeless mass and began to spread over the clean boards of the kitchen floor. Seeing that she had really melted away to nothing, Dorothy drew another bucket of water and threw it over the mess. She then swept it all out the door, after picking out the silver shoe, which was all that was left of the old woman. She cleaned and dried it with a cloth and put it on her foot again. Then, being at last free to do as she chose, she ran out to the courtyard to tell the lion that the Wicked Witch of the West had come to an end, and that they were no longer prisoners in a strange land. Chapter 13. The Rescue. The Cowardly Lion was much pleased to hear that the Wicked Witch had been melted by a bucket of water, and Dorothy at once unlocked the gate of his prison and set him free. They went in together to the castle, where Dorothy's first act was to call all the Winkies together and tell them that they were no longer slaves. There was great rejoicing among the yellow Winkies, for they had been made to work hard during many years for the Wicked Witch, who had always treated them with great cruelty. They kept this day as a holiday then and ever after, and spent the time in feasting and dancing. "If our friends the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were only with us," said the Lion, "I should be quite happy." "Don't you suppose we could rescue them?" asked the girl anxiously. "We can try," answered the Lion. So they called the yellow Winkies and asked them if they would help to rescue their friends. And the Winkies said that they would be delighted to do all in their power for Dorothy, who had set them free from bondage. So she chose a number of the Winkies who looked as if they knew the most, and they all started away. They travelled that day and part of the next until they came to the rocky plain where the Tin Woodman lay, all battered and bent. His axe was near him, but the blade was rusted and the handle broken off short. The Winkies lifted him tenderly in their arms and carried him back to the Yellow Castle again. Dorothy, shedding a few tears by the way at the sad plight of her old friend, and the Lion looking sober and sorry. When they reached the castle, Dorothy said to the Winkies, "Are any of your people tinsmiths?" "Oh, yes, some of us are very good tinsmiths," they told her. "Then bring them to me," she said, and when the tinsmiths came, bringing with them all their tools in baskets, she inquired, "Can you straighten out those dents in the Tin Woodman, and bend him back into shape again, and solder him together where he is broken?" The tinsmiths looked the Woodman over carefully, and then answered that they thought they could mend him so he would be as good as ever. So they set to work in one of the big yellow rooms of the castle and worked for 3 days and 4 nights, hammering and twisting and bending and soldering and polishing and pounding at the legs and body and head of the Tin Woodman, until at last he was straightened out into his old form, and his joints worked as well as ever. To be sure, there were several patches on him, but the tinsmiths did a good job, and as the Woodman was not a vain man, he did not mind the patches at all. When at last he walked into Dorothy's room and thanked her for rescuing him, he was so pleased that he wept tears of joy, and Dorothy had to wipe every tear carefully from his face with her apron, so his joints would not be rusted. At the same time, her own tears fell thick and fast at the joy of meeting her old friend again, and these tears did not need to be wiped away. As for the Lion, he wiped his eyes so often with the tip of his tail that it became quite wet, and he was obliged to go out into the courtyard and hold it in the sun until it dried. "If we only had the Scarecrow with us again," said the Tin Woodman, when Dorothy had finished telling him everything that had happened, "I should be quite happy." "We must try to find him," said the girl. So she called the Winkies to help her, and they walked all that day and part of the next until they came to the tall tree in the branches of which the winged monkeys had tossed the Scarecrow's clothes. It was a very tall tree, and the trunk was so smooth that no one could climb it. But the Woodman said at once, "I'll chop it down, and then we can get the Scarecrow's clothes." Now, while the tinsmiths had been at work mending the Woodman himself, another of the Winkies, who was a goldsmith, had made an axe handle of solid gold and fitted it to the Woodman's axe. Instead of the old broken handle, others polished the blade until all the rust was removed and it glistened like burnished silver. As soon as he had spoken, the Tin Woodman began to chop, and in a short time the tree fell over with a crash, whereupon the Scarecrow's clothes fell out of the branches and rolled off onto the ground. Dorothy picked them up and had the Winkies carry them back to the castle, where they were stuffed with nice, clean straw. And behold, here was the Scarecrow, as good as ever, thanking them over and over again for saving him. Now that they were reunited, Dorothy and her friends spent a few happy days at the Yellow Castle, where they found everything they needed to make them comfortable. But one day the girl thought of Aunt Em and said, "We must go back to Oz and claim his promise." "Yes," said the Woodman, "at last I shall get my heart." "And I shall get my brains," added the Scarecrow joyfully. "And I shall get my courage," said the Lion thoughtfully. "And I shall get back to Kansas," cried Dorothy, clapping her hands. "Oh, let us stand for the Emerald City tomorrow. Oh, let us start for the Emerald City tomorrow." This they decided to do. The next day they called the Winkies together and bade them goodbye. The Winkies were sorry to have them go, and they had grown so fond of the Tin Woodman that they begged him to stay and rule over them and the yellow land of the West. Finding they were determined to go, the Winkies gave Toto and the Lion each a golden collar. And to Dorothy they presented a beautiful bracelet studded with diamonds. And to the Scarecrow they gave a gold-headed walking stick to keep him from stumbling. And to the Tin Woodman they offered a silver oil can, inlaid with gold and set with precious jewels. Every one of the travellers made the Winkies a pretty speech in return, and all shook hands with them until their arms ached. Dorothy went to the witch's cupboard to fill her basket with food for the journey, and there she saw the golden cap. She tried it on her own head and found that it fitted her exactly. She did not know anything about the charm of the golden cap, but she saw that it was pretty, so she made up her mind to wear it and carry her sunbonnet in her basket. Then, being prepared for the journey, they all started for the Emerald City, and the Winkies gave them 3 cheers and many good wishes to carry with them. Chapter 14. The Winged Monkeys. You will remember there was no road, not even a pathway, between the castle of the Wicked Witch and the Emerald City. When the 4 travellers went in search of the witch, they had seen them coming, and so she had seen them coming, and so sent the winged monkeys to bring them to her. It was much harder to find their way back through the big fields of buttercups and yellow daisies than it was being carried. They knew, of course, they must go straight east, toward the rising sun, and they started off in the right way. But at noon, when the sun was over their heads, they did not know which was east and which was west, and that was the reason they were lost in the great fields. They kept on walking, however, and at night the moon came out and shone brightly. So they lay down among the sweet-smelling yellow flowers and slept soundly until morning, all but the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman. The next morning the sun was behind a cloud, but they started on as if they were quite sure which way they were going. If we walk far enough, said Dorothy, I am sure we shall sometime come to some place. But day by day passed away, and they still saw nothing before them but the scarlet fields. The Scarecrow began to grumble a bit. We have surely lost our way, he said, and unless we find it again in time to reach the Emerald City, I shall never get my brains. Nor I my heart, declared the Tin Woodman. It seems to me I can scarcely wait till I get to Oz, and you must admit this is a very long journey. You see, said the Cowardly Lion with a whisper, I haven't the courage to keep tramping forever without getting anywhere at all. Then Dorothy lost heart. She sat down on the grass and looked at her companions, and they sat down and looked at her, and Toto found that for the first time in his life he was too tired to chase a butterfly that flew past his head. So he put out his tongue and panted and looked at Dorothy as if to ask what they should do next. Suppose we call the field mice, she suggested. They could probably tell us the way to the Emerald City. To be sure they could, cried the Scarecrow. Why didn't we think of that before? Dorothy blew the little whistle she had always carried about her neck since the Queen of the Mice had given it to her. In a few minutes they heard the pattering of tiny feet, and many of the small grey mice came running up to her. Among them was the Queen herself, who asked, in her squeaky little voice, What can I do for my friends? We have lost our way, said Dorothy. Can you tell us where the Emerald City is? Certainly, answered the Queen, but it is a great way off, for you have had it at your backs all this time. Then she noticed Dorothy's golden cap and said, Why don't you use the charm of the cap and call the winged monkeys to you? They will carry you to the city of Oz in less than an hour. I didn't know there was a charm, answered Dorothy in surprise. What is it? It is written inside the golden cap, replied the Queen of the Mice. But if you are going to call the winged monkeys, we must run away, for they are full of mischief and think it great fun to plague us. Won't they hurt me? Asked the girl anxiously. Oh no, they must obey the wearer of the cap. Goodbye. And she scampered out of sight, with all the mice hurrying after her. Dorothy looked inside the golden cap and saw some words written upon the lining. These, she thought, must be the charm. So she read the directions carefully and put the cap upon her head. Epe, pepe, catke, she said, standing on her left foot. What did you say? Asked the Scarecrow, who did not know what she was doing. Hillo, hollo, hello, Dorothy went on, standing this time on her right foot. Hello, replied the Tin Woodman calmly. Zizzy, zuzzy, zik, said Dorothy, who was now standing on both feet. This ended the saying of the charm, and they heard a great chattering and flapping of wings as the band of winged monkeys flew upon to them. The king bowed low before Dorothy and asked, What is your command? We wish to go to the Emerald City, said the child, and we have lost our way. We will carry you, replied the king, and no sooner had he spoken than two of the monkeys caught Dorothy in their arms and flew away with her. Others took the Scarecrow and the Woodman and the Lion, and one little monkey seized Toto and flew after them, although the dog tried hard to bite him. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were rather frightened at first, for they remembered how badly the winged monkeys had treated them before. But they saw that no harm was intended, so they rode through the air quite cheerfully and had a fine time looking at the pretty gardens and woods far below them. Dorothy found herself riding easily between two of the biggest monkeys, one of them the king himself. They had made a chair of their hands and were careful not to hurt her. Why do you have to obey the charm of the golden cap? She asked. That is a long story, answered the king with a winged laugh, but as we have a journey before us, I will pass the time by telling you about it, if you wish. I shall be glad to hear it, she replied. Once, began the leader, we were a free people, living happily in the great forest. flying from tree to tree, eating nuts and fruit, and doing just as we please without calling anybody master. Perhaps some of us were rather too full of mischief at times, flying down to pull the tails of the animals that had no wings, chasing birds, and throwing nuts at the people who walked into the forest. But we were careless and happy and full of fun and enjoyed every minute of the day. This was many years ago, long before Oz came out of the clouds to rule over his land. There lived here then, away at the north, a beautiful princess, who was also a powerful sorceress. All her magic was used to help the people, and she was never known to hurt anyone who was good. Her name was Gaelette, and she lived in a handsome place built from great blocks of ruby. Everyone loved her, but her greatest sorrow was that she could find no one to love in return, since all the men were much too stupid and ugly to mate with one so beautiful and wise. At last, however, she found a boy who was handsome and manly and wise beyond his years. Gaelette made up her mind that when he grew to be a man, she would make him her husband. So she took him to her ruby palace and used all her magic powers to make him as strong and good and lovely as any woman could wish. When he grew to manhood, Quilala, as he was called, was said to be the best and wisest man in all the land, while his manly beauty was so great that Gaelette loved him dearly and hastened to make everything ready for the wedding. My grandfather was at that time the king of the winged monkeys, which lived in the forests near Gaelette's palace, and the old fellow loved a joke better than a good dinner. One day, just before the wedding, my grandfather was flying out with his band when he saw Kalala walking beside the river. He was dressed in a rich costume of pink silk and purple velvet, and my grandfather thought he would see what he could do. At his word, the band flew down and seized Quilala, carried him in their arms until they were over the middle of the river, and then dropped him into the water. "Swim out, my fine fellow," cried the grandfather, "and see if the water has spotted your clothes." Quilala was much too wise not to swim, and he was not in the least spoiled by all his good fortune. He laughed when he came to the top of the water and swam into shore. But when Gaelette came running out to him, she found his silks and velvet all ruined by the river. The princess was angry, and she knew, of course, who did it. She had all the winged monkeys brought before her, and she said at first that their wings should be tied, and they should be treated as they had treated Quilala, and dropped in the river. But my grandfather pleaded hard, for he knew the monkeys would drown in the river with their wings tied, and Quilala said a kind word for them also, so that Gaelette finally spared them on condition that the winged monkeys should ever after do 3 times the bidding of the owner of the golden cap. This cap had been made for a wedding present to Quilala, and it is said to have cost the princess half her kingdom. Of course, my grandfather and all the other monkeys at once agreed to the condition, and that is how it happens that we are 3 times the slaves of the owner of the golden cap, whosoever he may be. "And what became of them?" asked Dorothy, who had been greatly interested in the story. "Quilala, being the first owner of the golden cap, replied the monkey he was the first to lay his wishes upon us. As his bride could not bear the sight of us, he called us all to him in the forest after he had married her, and ordered us always to keep where she could never set eyes on a winged monkey, which we were glad to do, for we were all afraid of her. This was all we ever had to do until the golden cap fell into the hands of the wicked witch of the West, who made us enslave the Winkies and afterward drive Oz himself out of the land of the West. Now the golden cap is yours, and 3 times you have the right to lay your wishes upon us." As the Monkey King finished his story, Dorothy looked down and saw the green, shining walls of the Emerald City before them. She wondered at the rapid flight of the monkeys, but was glad the journey was over. The strange creatures set the travellers down carefully before the gate of the city. The king bowed low to Dorothy and then flew swiftly away, followed by all his band. "That was a good ride," said the little girl. "Yes, and a quick way out of our troubles," replied the lion. "How lucky it was you brought away that wonderful cap." And there we are on chapter 15, The Discovery of Oz the Terrible. And that is where we shall start up in a few hours. It's 6:30. So 2 hours and 10 minutes from now, we will start up with chapter 15 and continue on the story. So hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully we'll see you later for the last chapter. If you've joined us later on in this live, then you can go back to the beginning to see the housekeeping that we said about. And you can also go back and watch chapter 1 to 8, which has already been done. So we'll say goodbye and leave you. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully see you later.